Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight at the Parthenon. My name is Katie. I work here at the museum. I'd like to thank Metro Nashville Parks and Recreation for organizing the symposium tonight, along with Centennial Park Conservancy, the nonprofit that supports 100% of Parthenon programs and exhibitions. And tonight we also have a special sponsor, the Archaeological Institute of America Nashville Society is funding this named lecture, named for Alan Baycold Lectures in Athenian Archaeology and Letters. So this is a named lecture in honor of Professor Baycold of Brown University. He's a former chairman of the managing committee of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. These lectures focus on Athenian archaeology, reflecting the lifelong interests of Alan Baycold, the honoree, and the lectureship donor, James Ottaway Jr. A longtime friend of the AIA, Mr. Ottaway served as a trustee and treasurer of the AIA, also achieving their Distinguished Service Award. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Helen Sanders, the Parthenon's Director of Education, who will be introducing tonight's speaker.
It's commonplace to say this speaker needs no introduction. And it might actually be true this evening when the speaker is Alan LeQuire, who is reflecting on Nashville's Athena Parthenos, a statue he created between 1982 and 1990 in a project that combined archaeological research with artistic vision. But I'm going to stay up here and say a few more words. Anyway, so the statue was unveiled to the public on May 20th, 1990. And to celebrate Athena's 35th birthday last spring, our Parthenon's curator, Jennifer Richardson, worked with Alan over about 18 months or so to open two new exhibitions, Monumental Figures, which was here on the upper level, between June and September of last year. I'm curious, just raise your hand if you came to see Monumental Figures. And also Goddess in Progress, which is still on view in the East Gallery on the lower level. Now, Monumental Figures highlighted real women who have inspired Alan, and it invited us to think about the heroes in our own lives. It also reminded us of the full scope of Alan's post-Athena career, which includes portraits, historical and commemorative monuments, such as the suffragettes outside here in Centennial Park, the colossal figures of Musica, and my personal favorites, the reliefs on the bronze doors of the main library downtown. If you came and heard Alan's talk about that show in June, you know that he highlighted the contributions of his whole team at LeQuire Studios and Gallery, and he is a very generous mentor and teacher. Just as he has benefited from early training with sculptors such as Per-Year Mims, Milton Hebald, and Peter Agostini, among many other influences. Now we've invited Alan back tonight to reflect on the making of Athena in conjunction with Goddess in Progress on the lower level. As we sit here facing the statue, we may feel that it was inevitable that it took this exact form. We can't imagine it any other way. But to set the stage for tonight's talk, I want to take you back to a time in the early 80s and I know some of you were here. So think about this space as it was when it was mostly empty. Remember an architect and civic leader named Anne Roos, who led the charge with an ambitious and audacious proposal to complete a huge monumental Athena. Remember a relatively new director of the Parthenon named Wesley Payne. Think about a young, unknown sculptor who won an open competition to undertake the project. And think about a wonderful professor named Brunilda Ridgway at Bryn Mawr College, who provided infectious enthusiasm and belief in the archaeological value of the project at a time when other scholars were maybe a little more circumspect. And now that we're in that frame of mind, that's where our story begins. And I'll turn it over to Alan to take us further into the story.
Thank you very much, Alan. I don't really want to go back there, but I am there. The task of recreating the Athena Parthenos was complicated and long, and I'm not an archaeologist. And what I was seeking as a student when I was in my 20s was classical training, which didn't really exist. And like an idiot, I went to Europe thinking, oh, they still have the French Academy. You know, I could go to the French Academy, but at the French Academy, they were teaching conceptual art. And all the artists had these long scarves, and they argued with each other about conceptual art. And so I did eventually get some training, some actual useful training, from other sculptors who had had a little bit of classical training. And Pereira Mims was one, but knowing him just made me more curious about the training that was not available in the States. And so I'm very fortunate tonight because I brought a model, Brett Seablum from the Nashville Ballet, and I'm going to show you the essence of what I learned in Europe, which is about the composing a figure that is perfectly balanced. And this is the great invention of the Greeks. When you put your weight on one leg, as Athena has her weight on her right leg, the torso and neck moves over the weight-bearing leg. And this is the most important thing that I learned in all my apprenticeships in Italy and in France. And I'm going to demonstrate it for you with a plumb line. The plumb line is the most important tool for an artist. And we use it in drawing and in sculpting. Because I can't take the mic over there. I'll just shout. But please observe where the plumb line falls as Brett takes these different positions. Okay, right. Weight on your right leg. Go this way. When you place your weight on one leg, the neck and the head will move over and be directly over that ankle. So the neck is plumb over the ankle. And most of the Greek statuary from this period is in this position, which I call the weight shift position or formal weight shift. When the shoulders are level, it's a very stiff pose, so I call it formal weight shift. Later, we get in the 15th century in Italy, we get contrapposto, and so now you exaggerate this with your hip out farther, and your left shoulder up. Okay, contrapposto is something entirely different, which Michelangelo was the one who perfected this pose, but the plumb line is still doing exactly the same thing, going from the sternal notch at the base of the neck directly through the middle of the ankle. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So that's academic art in a nutshell right there. Thank you so much, Brent. So I've been working from models my whole career, but I've only been able to work from ballet dancers 3 times. This is the 3rd time. They are the most fantastic athletes, and I urge you to join the ballet and support them. I'm urging you to be a joiner, join the Conservancy, and join the AIA, Archaeological Institute of America. Both of them have great benefits to your membership. To Anne Roos, who is here tonight, Athena would not exist if Anne had not been the voice of conscience at the park board in the 80s that prevented the park board from spending the money that was raised to build a statue of Athena on something else. And not only that, but she helped me all the way through the project, including mixing plaster, and made sure that I got it done. The same is true at Fannie Mae Dees Park. It wouldn't exist without the work of Anne Roos. This is a wonderful photograph that I just wanted to share with you. This is Enid Yandel in the studio in Chicago. One of my assistants worked hours and hours cleaning up this photograph on Photoshop. Enid is seated on the ladder, and there are 9 men who are assisting her. And this, for 1892, this is incredible. There were many sculptors who worked on the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition in 1892. There were very few women who were able to exhibit their own work. Enid Yandel was one, and she did, I think there were 24 of these colossal caryatids which she made for the Women's Building. Of course, all this stuff, like the sculpture and architecture that was made for the Nashville Centennial in 1896, was made of plaster, and so it dissolved. Ultimately, it was all torn down. Enid Yandel was a remarkable sculptor who had a studio in Paris and one in New York. Augustus St. Gaudens was one of the few male sculptors who had that same advantage, and St. Gaudens viewed her as a threat. She was that good. For the Centennial in Nashville, they commissioned her to make an Athena. She actually, this Athena that she made, which was 25 feet tall, was outside just to the east of the Parthenon. It was 25 feet tall on a 15-foot tall base, so 40 feet tall complete. And it's based on the Athena from the Velletri Athena, which is in the Louvre. This is a Roman marble copy of what we think was a Greek bronze original. The other woman sculptor associated with this building is Belle Kinney, who she was 6 years old at the time of the centennial in 1896, and she won the competition for sculpture at 6 years old. So she was a real prodigy. Later in the 1920s, she and her husband created the pediment sculptures for the east and west sides of this building. The city bought casts of the Parthenon marbles from the British Museum, and Bell and Leopold assembled the casts in the correct positions, or what they believed were the correct positions, and then filled in the missing parts with clay. They made plaster molds, cast everything in the exposed aggregate cement. And I've never been able to find an article about their archaeological research, but I'm still looking, and it's sort of on my bucket list. If no one else does it, if I can't talk someone else into doing it, I'm going to have to write about it myself. This is Belle Kinney. On the left is the architect Russell Hart, who redesigned the Parthenon in the 1920s, and Leopold Schultz. If you haven't noticed, I'm going through all the women who are important in this building, and or some of them, not all of them. When I look at this building, this is what I see. I see all the energy and the hard work of lots and lots of women. And Athena, Athena's that big one there. There's no getting around that. But and the Parthenon in Athens is sort of the same thing. It was after a temple to Athena. It was a Christian church honoring the Virgin for hundreds of years afterwards. So it's always served that function. This is Brunilda Ridgway, who was an archaeologist, one of the greatest in the world for specializing in the classical period of Greece. Evelyn Harrison, who also was a brilliant archaeologist. These two ladies helped me with every aspect of the statue. Nita Lipin, also a great archaeologist at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. Nita created her own model of the Athena statue in the early 70s. So when I won the commission to create my Athena, this was the most recent recreation that had ever been made. And I asked Nita Lipin if she would help me with my project, and she was not interested. She had just made her own Athena, and I understand why she was not interested. But she had published all her research, which was wonderful for me because I had all the research and the conclusions that she drew in my hand every day, and so I was able to use that, and it shortened the time that I had to do research. When I saw this, though, in like 1982, certain things about it bothered me. One was the column. The column makes no sense under the right hand because it's not the same order as the colonnade that surrounds us. This is actually comes in time before the Corinthian column was fully developed. So they called this a proto-Corinthian column, but there's no real evidence for it. The other thing, the problem that I had with it is that the scale seems wrong. It seems like a Cupid doll. It's like it's too small for the space. And I knew from my research that the point of the Greek temple was to be just barely enough of an enclosure to surround the iconic statue. of whatever god or goddess it was. So I felt that she should be bigger. And then I was presented with the drawing that William Dinsmore did for the Nashville Parthenon. Russell Hart commissioned William Bell Dinsmore, who was the foremost authority on Greek architecture, to actually draw this room that we're sitting in. It is, they followed his design exactly, and in that drawing he included a silhouette of the statue of Athena, and the plumes of her helmet almost touch the beams above. And when I saw that, I immediately understood what the proportions should look like. And so that's what I followed. I followed Dinsmore for that. And then the most important difference about this little statuette that did not seem authentic is that she's not in weight shift. Weight shift is what I just demonstrated to you with Brett. And we know that Phidias, the sculptor of Athena, understood weight shift. Greek sculptors understood it fully 100 years before that. This is the Roman version of the Athena Parthenos that is where most people start. And I have to admit, I started with this too. It's the most complete Roman version that we have. It's done in the late second, early 3rd century AD. So probably the original statue was long gone. It would have been over 600 years old at that point. This is another Roman version. This is the Lenormand statuette. When I saw this, I realized, oh, well, maybe the original was in weight shift because her right foot is closer to being under her neck than it is in the Barbacian statuette. And the other thing that impressed me was that the sculptor had carved away the marble under the right hand, showing that maybe he did not intend to make a column. And thank goodness I have an assistant, Amber Lilly, who takes my scratchy old drawings and makes digital versions of them. This is an imagined cross-section at the waist of the statue. The Barbacian statuette has the arm straight forward, and you cannot create a cantilever if the arm is in that position. But if you open the arm up a little bit like it is in the Lenormand statuette, then you allow a beam to go into the statue and you can create a counterweight inside. These were my revelations. And these were the discussions that I had with Brunilda Ridgway and Eve Harrison, but it was all on the phone because it was before the age of email or in letters. I mean, some of it was in letters. And finally, this is another Roman version of the statue that is in Patras in Greece. And I did not see this in person when I went to Greece for research. It was only later that I realized, oh, wow, this is actually in it's in weight shift. And I made little drawings by hand, which my assistant Amber has made a digital version here, where I've added the head, the missing head, so you can see that the center line, which is the plumb line, actually falls from the base of her neck in across the big toe. So this is all evidence for this major change I made in the recreations of the Athena statue. The maidens from the porch of the Erechtheion were sculpted about 20 years after Athena, and they're all in formal weight shift. At the British Museum, I even crawled up there and dropped a plumb line from her chin, and they did not arrest me. But you can see it falls through the middle of the big toe. And this is the position that is used over and over and over. it became the standard, the hallmark of Greek sculpture. This is a part of the frieze, which was done about 440 BC, which is, we think, when Phidias made the Athena statue. So the same time as he was building the Athena statue, he made these figures. And if you examine them, every one of them is in formal weight shift. The ladies look like they're marching, but they're not. They're actually stationary, and their non-weight bearing leg is jutting forward instead of to the side or back. So that's where I was when I started, and I'm going to take you through this very quickly because I want to leave time for questions later on, but also I can get bogged down. I made a 1/10 scale version using a human model. This is my friend and fellow artist Annie Freeman, who modeled for me. Although I knew all this stuff about weight shift, I hadn't really ever done anything in weight shift. I'd worked from models in Europe and in North Carolina in graduate school, but we had never really just made a figure in weight shift. So I had to do the human proportioned version. And then once I had that, I was able to double the scale to a 1/5 scale and change the proportions to mimic Greek sculpture from the 5th century. And this was the main working model for the statue of Athena. And once I had it there, Brunilda Ridgway came down to my studio and critiqued it. I made some minor changes. And then I'd made the corrections for perspective. There's no real formula for this, but the proportions of Athena are modified so that she looks more lifelike from where you're sitting. The ideal angle is at the front doors. And over and over, I tried to view the model from that vantage point. And then I changed things about her so that she would look normal from that angle. Normally, if something's farther away from you, it's smaller. So I did all these things to change the size of the torso and the head to make it look normal from a distance. Then I I cast it and I cut it into 5 sections. We made wooden armatures. The purpose of the armatures was to hold the clay, because I had decided at this point that I had to sculpt her in clay and make molds and cast her so that I could guarantee a consistent thickness and a lower weight so that she didn't go crashing through the floor. And the technique I used for enlarging was basically just done with rulers, and it's the same thing you would do with an enlarging machine, except I couldn't afford that. I just constructed a imaginary grid and used rulers to measure everything. I knew that Athena's head would be the most important part that would determine her character, and so I started with the head. Also, it allowed me to make a casting of each section that was only about 6 inches tall that I could put on top of the next section to make sure that everything lined up. These are the different models that I used for the head. This is a head in Brescia that is generally thought to be a copy of the style of Phidias. It's an Athena and What I liked about it was the naturalism, especially in the hair. Brunilda Ridgway wanted me to make the archaic waves of hair, which are an older style. But once I saw this head, I realized, no, Phidias wouldn't have done that. It would have been much more naturalistic. This is the Weber-Laborde head, we have a copy up here, which is believed to be from the Parthenon. So I looked at that a lot. And then I wanted Athena to have this very strong theatrical presence. And so I used Jesse Norman mainly for the cheeks, and Leontine Price. They are both in this Athena. Mainly the cheeks and the eyes. And of course, this guy, who had the perfect Greek statue mouth, and also the line, the real strong line of the brows that we associate with the work of Phidias. And then I built her up in clay. This is about 4 tons of clay. Yeah, so this was the end of '83, and my 18 months was up. And I had agreed to make the statue in 18 months. It just went on, and I'm sure drove Anne completely crazy. This was 6 tons of clay. Even though it's hollow and it's only 3 or 4 inches thick, it still required 6 tons of clay to sculpt this. Each time I finished a section of the statue, I had to make plaster molds. The plaster molds, 20 to 30 molds for each section. The molds weighed 150 to 200 pounds each. So tons and tons of plaster. And then the molds are filled with gypsum cement, which is like just a hard plaster that's reinforced with chopped fiberglass strand. This was the material I decided on, which would be as light as I could make it. Because the casting's only about 1 inch thick. But then once the piece is cast, you have to chip the plaster off with a hammer and chisel. And then you're left with these panels that then you have to reassemble. So this would have been 1986, probably. We assembled Athena's head here on the floor of this room. And meanwhile, I was back in the warehouse making the next section. This is, again, about 6 tons of clay. I used the same clay over and over, reprocessed it each time. There's Anne Roos mixing plaster, flipping plaster on Athena's feet. And then finally, we began this steel armature. My second plan of making Athena in the lightweight materials with an aluminum armature, the city engineers agreed it would probably the floor would support that. But then in late 86, 87, they decided to remodel the basement of the Parthenon, and they were going to shut the building down for several months. And it was decided by the Metropolitan Park Board that it would be much better and would survive an earthquake if we took the weight of the statue through the floor, down through the gallery downstairs into bedrock. So that's what that big square box is in the gallery downstairs. It's hiding the 4 concrete pillars that go through the room down to bedrock. And then on top of that concrete structure, they welded a I say they, it was, Anne got the Rogers Group Construction Company to donate this labor to build this steel tower. And one day when I was late, I got here, and the two welders from Rogers Group had lifted the head and shoulders, which is on an aluminum armature, and just put it on top of the tower. And I came in the room and was looking all around, where's Athena, where's the head? And I finally looked up, and there it was. So once that was done, I began assembling all the other parts from the bottom up. I designed it so that each panel was wide enough for me to lift. I had helpers, I had several volunteer helpers and a paid assistant, but it was all designed so that one person could do it all, put the jigsaw puzzle back together. I would clamp the pieces in place with wooden wedges and clamps, and then build these support arms in steel and weld everything, and then clean everything and paint everything, and then put the pieces back. And then each steel arm is embedded in the same material, a patch of the same material that holds each panel individually to the steel structure. And it's remarkable that I lived through this project at all, because I was really stupid. But I had 3 men at one point jumping on this beam just to make sure that it would hold the Nike. This is a view of that beam from the inside the statue at her right elbow. And then last year, the year before, I talked my wife and daughter into climbing around inside Athena one summer, like for a month and a half, to measure everything. And a friend of mine, Dan Spomer, made these CAD drawings of the armature. So these drawings, I didn't have these drawings to work from. This is a later thing. But this explains how the cantilever works. The beam, this is a view from above, but the only important beam attached to the main beam is the one below it. That creates the fulcrum. Where it attaches to the steel armature is the counterweight. Those other gussets that you see running from the beam upward are all totally useless, and they're just a measure of my paranoia, because I felt like with the weight of the Nike, the beam might twist. So those other gussets are there to counteract a twist in the beam. We got up to the top of the aegis where the head of Medusa is, and that's what we're looking at. We're looking at sort of the left breast and the center piece where Medusa was. And that became sort of a door. We walked in and out of that for weeks as we welded the last of the steel beams. Then finally we attached the last piece, which was Medusa. And I breathed a big sigh of relief because I thought I was done. But actually, when I sat down and thought about it that night, I reached a near panic because I still had all these other things to do. I had a larger-than-life sphinx, 2 winged horses, griffins in relief, giant plumes that extend down her back, giant earrings and a necklace, and that's just the helmet. And then down below, I hadn't done her forearms or her hands. The statue of Nike, the shield, which is 15 feet in diameter with 31 figures in relief, and the giant snake and the spear, and then the base with 21 figures in relief. I was like completely panicked. But I did sort of a Vulcan mind trick. I made myself just concentrate, list everything in a list, and then just concentrate on one thing. And I would do that every day. Would get myself in that frame of mind every day, and I just would take each piece separately. And so I started at the top and worked my way down. This is the Aspasius gem, which is a Roman, I forget what the jewel is, but it is generally considered a pretty good inventory of what was on Athena's helmet. So that was my guide. This is me being depressed. But I'm also showing you because I want you to see the scale from the bottom of her nose to the top of the head of the Sphinx is about 6 feet. Does it look like that? It never looks big enough to me. For each of the parts of the helmet, I welded a steel armature, and I took a lot of care with these armatures because I wanted to make sure nothing fell off. And I don't want to jinx it, but I'm really glad nothing's fallen off. For the earrings, I've used actual earrings that are in the British Museum that are from the 5th century. I changed the figure in the middle to an owl because, up to this point, there were no owls on the statue, and that's Athena's favorite animal. And this is a necklace, I think it's in a Russian museum from the same period. So I made all these parts, and I used actual brass chains to hold everything together. And we later gilded everything. And so this was probably, 6 months of work, the completed helmet. Then it was on to the Nike. For this, I had most help from Evelyn Harrison. She had written several papers about the Nike. This is a head in the Agora Museum that she suggested that I use. This was my version of that. And I sculpted her in clay, just like everything else, right here in this room on the floor. And then made molds and cast her in plaster. She was at least 600 pounds. And that was me trying to keep it as light as I could. And then that orange thing in the middle is a winch, a hand-cranked winch, which we bolted to the beam, to the steel beam. And I left a steel hook coming out of her neck that we could attach to, and we flew her up into a place on the arm and bolted her down. Then the laurel wreath is made of brass. I just cut leaves out of brass and soldered them together. Then it was on to the shield. And this was 88, I think. Eve Harrison came down, and once I had most of the shield done, she came down and critiqued it. And I went by the the drawing that Eve had done for her paper on the reconstruction of the shield. But once I laid all the figures on the shield, I realized that they didn't fit at the scale that they should have been. So I had to reduce the sizes of all the figures to make them fit on a 15-foot diameter shield. And that really bothered me because I didn't like making them smaller than they were supposed to have been. But the only other option was to make the whole shield bigger, which would have cost me another 3 months or so to change the size of the shield. So Eve Harrison actually agreed with me that the shield should have been bigger, but I just decided I couldn't redo the whole thing, and so it's a mistake, but I blame it on her. Then this is the steel armature for the finished shield. And actually, in terms of engineering, this side of the statue is a lot worse than the cantilevered Nike. The shield is a tremendous amount of weight, and it had to be distributed over as large an area of the floor as possible. So the guys from Rogers Group Construction came back and helped me place this huge I-beam on the floor, which is mortared onto the floor so that it transfers weight. And all the weight of the shield comes down to that steel beam, which is flat. I've got a pointer here. Yeah, this is the beam that's under the shield. Meanwhile, my assistants were assembling the cast panels of the shield. And I moved on to the figures on the base. The part board was encouraging me to hurry up because it had been a really long time and they were all tired of it, I'm sure. But they set an unveiling date a year in advance, and then I had to speed things up to meet that unveiling date. Once again, sculpted in clay and then made molds. And then I marked we had a company to come over and put this marble veneer on the base of the statue first. And I got moldings made by the local company, Stevens Millwork, for the bottom molding. And then I bolted my cast figures onto the surface. And we had just enough money left to gild the figures on the base. Who was the donor for that? Do you remember? For your family. Anyway, they made a large donation, which allowed us to gild part of the statue. And I met a master gilder named Lou Reed, who had a shop in Madison, and she came down and gilded all these right before the unveiling. And so that's the way it was when I finished it in the May of 1990, and then there was the huge unveiling event. 12 years later, the park board had raised enough money to gild the statue, and I heard that they were taking bids for gilding, all of which were larger than the amount of money we had spent on the whole statue, and which bothered me. And so I went out and saw Lou Reed, and I asked her if she were up for gilding the whole statue, and she was, of course, and so we placed our own bid, which the park board accepted. And Lou, we chose 11 art teachers who were off for the summer, and Lou trained them to be gilders. And that was our team, and they gilded the whole statue in 2 months. I did the painting. This is me with my assistant, Jenny Gill, painting Athena's face. The eyelashes are cut out of brass and later gilded. And we were consulting with both Bruni Ridgway and Eve Harrison through this process when we were choosing colors. And then the biggest part of this work in 2002 was the Gigantomachy, the battle of gods and giants on the interior of the shield. And this is another part of the statue that I would change if I could. Both Bruni and Eve insisted that I limit my palette to what can be found in Greek vase painting of the same period, which is a strong dark outline with color. It's a paint by number, basically. And it bothers me a lot, but I think we know that Phidias was a painter. His brother was a painter. He was from a family of artists. His painting would have been a lot more complex. And so this is another one of my regrets about the things that I did. The whole shield, in fact, I would like to redo. Another regret is the brightness of the gold itself. I think the Greeks would have used gold which was gently hammered onto the surface, and so it would have been a more dull finish. Plus, the room itself never would have been illuminated like this with Klieg lights or whatever. It was a very dark place, and so I think particularly as for a sculptor, the brightness of the finish sort of washes out the three-dimensional form, and that's why I would like to change it. And then this is, there she is. Is it an hour? Just FYI, this is the project Andre, my wife, and I are still working on. I unveiled the Musica statue in 2003, and the conception of this is also very Greek. It comes from the idea of the omphalos. The Greeks believed there was sort of a navel of the world from which flowed creativity and energy. And so I began this with that concept in mind, and I combined that with the idea of dance being the physical expression of music. That's what's behind this, but it was always meant to be a fountain. And we're trying to make the fountain happen. I hope it doesn't turn into a 100-year project like Athena, but we've partnered with Wet Design. Wet Design has done some of the greatest fountains in the world, and their plan for the Nashville Parthenon is Nashville Fountains of Musica is really amazing. It's actually 3 fountains. There's a fountain in the median going towards the Virgin Hotel, where the water just seems to seep out of the seams of the rock. Then there's a big plaza in Owen Bradley Park with little jewels of water that pop up and a mist that covers everything. And that can all be turned off so that it becomes a performance area. And then, of course, the main fountain, which is choreographed. It's all the jets of water are changing constantly. So hopefully next year. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're the first to know about all the exciting things happening at the Nashville Parthenon.